Welcome everybody to our meeting today. So before we start, going to do an acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which we are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that our watershed forms a part of the treaty and traditional territory of the southeastern Anishinaabe. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we live and work. To honor this legacy, we commit to being stewards of the natural environment and undertake to have a relationship of respect with our treaty partners. So we're going to get a motion to adopt the agenda. Tracy and Jerry, and any additions, change? All in favor? Carry. Good. And any declarations of pecuniary interest? None noted. Okay, and can we have a motion to approve the minutes of 6/24? Jerry and Peter, any comments? No. All in favor? Carried. Okay, any business arising from the minutes? No. No deputations. And we're on to 6. Presentations and applicable action items. 6.1, Canada's past, present, and future climates. Chris Dirksen, research scientist in Environment and Climate Change Canada presentation. So.
Everybody, can you hear me okay?
We're just turn around. Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen, and I don't use Zoom as much as I use Teams. So hopefully I can do this properly. Give me 1 second.
And there's Kriya too. Sorry, hi,
Right.
Kriya.
Can you see my PowerPoint
Yes,
now?
we can.
Okay, I'll just put it into full screen mode. That should look even better, I hope.
Yep.
Okay. 1 second. Okay, well, thanks very much for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm going to spend about 15 or 20 minutes running through my slides, and then hopefully leave lots of time for questions as they may arise. So my name is Chris Dirksen. I'm a research scientist in the Climate Research Division at Environment and Climate Change Canada. I'm based in Toronto. And my colleague, Megan Kirkmeyer-Young, is also joining the meeting today, and she'll be helping me field questions from you a little bit later. So my presentation will be broken up into 4 basic parts. First, a little bit of background on the physics of climate change. Why is it happening? Why has it happened? A little bit of more contextual information on how our climate has changed. And then a lot of time spent on the impacts of climate change. So we know temperatures are warming. What has that meant for all of us? And then finally, what does the future hold? What do climate model projections tell us about what we can expect into the future? So a lot of what I'm presenting on today comes from 2 different sources. One is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. You may have heard of the IPCC before. They produce very authoritative assessments of the physics and the impacts of climate change. They do this on about a 7 or 8 year cycle. We're just finishing the 6th assessment cycle for the IPCC, and they are embarking now on the 7th assessment cycle. So I'll be using some key results from the 6th assessment cycle, which completed its work about a year ago now. And then we have our own kind of made in Canada climate assessment process. We produced a report in 2019 called Canada's Changing Climate Report, which is focused on the Canadian territory and the physical changes to our climate system. So a lot of my messages today will be drawn from that, and you can find that resource online. And I should note that we are currently in the process of producing the next version of Canada's Changing Climate Report that will be released in 2025. So a lot of what I'm showing you now obviously is still relevant and still current, but we'll be updating that very soon in the next year or so. So at the next part of my presentation, I'm going to just step through how we've come to understand the human influence on the climate system and sort of piece together the background material just so you understand the physics, the basic physics of climate change. So one thing we know from measurements is that greenhouse gas emissions have increased over time. So what this plot from the IPCC shows is the magnitude of greenhouse gas emissions since the onset of the Industrial Revolution in around 1850 to, in this case, 2019. And what we see in the darker shading here is a large increase in carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel burning, mostly from human activities, obviously. We have other CO2, carbon dioxide emissions from land use and land use changes. That's the sort of gray color in the middle. And then on top of that, we have non-carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions, largely methane and nitrous oxide, and that's the lighter green color on the top. So the key message here is that our emissions from human activities have increased dramatically. Our emissions of greenhouse gases have increased dramatically over the last 150, 170 years. This increase of greenhouse gas emissions, these greenhouse gases reside in our atmosphere for a long time. In the case of carbon dioxide, it takes hundreds or thousands of years for that carbon dioxide to be naturally removed from the atmosphere. So these emissions of greenhouse gases live in our atmosphere for a very long time. And so we can see the measured increases of the concentrations of greenhouse gas in our atmosphere, and again, how these have increased since 1850. Carbon dioxide, the purple line on top, methane, the line in the middle, nitrous oxide, the line in the middle. So again, the burden here is very much from carbon dioxide, although some of these greenhouse gases like nitrous oxide, its concentration in the atmosphere might look low, but it's a very potent greenhouse gas. It's very effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere. So even though the nitrous oxide concentrations are low, we're still very concerned with increases in gases like that. So we have increased emissions, we have increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. What does this all mean from a surface temperature point of view? This is the mean annual temperature around the planet from measurements on the surface. And you can see right around 1930 or 40, we start to see an increase above the long-term average. And this increase has continued up until present time and will continue to increase as we continue to increase the load of greenhouse gases. The colors along the stripe here just show you the magnitude of warming. So we're somewhere between 1 and 1.5 degrees of warming now as we're experiencing it globally. So when we put all of these pieces together, we end up with a plot like this in the middle, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. But I think the take-home message here is that the climate science community understands the physics of climate change very well. We have observed warming. This warming is caused by greenhouse gases, the dominant one being carbon dioxide, but methane is also very important. And actually what we've seen is a bit of a masking in our global warming by cooling from aerosols in the atmosphere. So what this column plot shows is the relative contribution of different components of the climate system to warming. And so our total human influence from greenhouse gases would be about 1.5 degrees warming already, but we're only down at about 1 degree. And that's because of this little negative gray line here. This is aerosols in the atmosphere that are emitted from human use. Those cool the climate system. So we have a bit of an offset, but the warming signal totally dominates the cooling signal. And so we take this as a whole, the global annual surface temperature is about 1.1 degrees higher over the past decade than it was in reference times before that, and we will expect this level of global warming to increase. Canada has warmed about 2 times the global warming rate. So it's maybe 1.1 is the global average, but if we look only at Canada, we're at about over 2 degrees warming. And if you look at northern Canada, it's been about 3 times the global average. So we're experiencing the impacts of climate change in Canada at quite a high level. And that's for well understood reason. The first is that as you move further north on the planet, the amplified effects of climate change increase. So we have a number of positive feedbacks in the climate system, which I won't talk about, that drive this increased warming. So we're seeing this enhanced warming across Canada. That's consistent with other northern countries. So all northern land areas are experiencing this elevated rate of warming. Canada, of course, is one of those. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a flavor of why our climate is changing and has changed and what the mechanisms are behind that. So what does this mean again for Canada, focusing in on our country? This map shows the mean annual temperature increase. It's a little bit behind the times now. The trend is only through 2018. We have a new version of this that will be coming out in the next report. But you can see across the whole country, we're experiencing warming in the northwestern part of the Northwest Territories and the Yukon in particular. That's where our hottest spot has been, our largest warming. Again, as you move north, you tend to see higher rates of warming. But you can see really the message is the same over the entire country. We have experienced warming. This trend starts in 1948 because that's when we have a full, reliable record of surface measurements across the country that we can calculate the trend from. So we expect and we know that this pattern will continue into the future. So what are we seeing from this warming? I'll get into a bit more detail in subsequent slides, but we're seeing more extreme heat, less extreme cold events. We have snow cover on the surface for a shorter amount of time each year. Sea ice in the Arctic. Again, we have less sea ice and thinner sea ice. Our glaciers are losing mass, so they're shrinking and getting thinner. The oceans are becoming warmer, so the water temperatures are warmer, and that in turn changes the chemical composition of the water itself. So we have more acidic oceans. All of this sort of together creates more extreme fire weather. So I think we're all very aware of that risk. We've seen some very damaging fire events, including a number ongoing right now. We have less snow cover, less moisture in the surface in the spring. The forest dries earlier. The temperatures are warmer. All of this creates conditions that lead to more fire weather. We're seeing increased precipitation, especially extreme rainfall events, and that's because a warmer atmosphere can store more water vapor. So when it rains, we tend to get more rain from a certain event. These changes also are creating changes in our stream flow. So when do we have peak stream flow? It's getting earlier in the season because the snow is melting earlier. Permafrost is thawing, sea level is increasing. So all of these things are changing across our country because of climate change. I'll get into more detail on some of those in subsequent slides, but the key point here is that further warming is unavoidable. So we're not going to turn off the carbon switch tomorrow or next year or even next decade. It will take time, of course. So as we evolve, hopefully towards a lower carbon economy, we will still continue to see increases in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. As I mentioned already, these greenhouse gases reside for a really long time in the atmosphere. So we really have to learn to adapt to the impacts of climate change. That's I think, a really key message here. I'll now go through some specific sort of sectors or impacts of changes to the climate system. I'll start with precipitation. So it's projected to increase over most of Canada if we average the annual cycle. As I mentioned, a warmer atmosphere can store more water, so we tend to see more precipitation. Observations are shown in the top plot here. So these run again from about 1948 to about 2015 in this plot. And you can see the average or the anomaly. So how it differs from the long-term average. We're going from drier than normal conditions to wetter than average conditions in recent decades. So we're observing increased precipitation across Canada. Less of this is falling as snow. More of this is falling as rain. So we're getting a change in the proportional phase of precipitation. And our climate models project that we'll see further increases in precipitation in all seasons, except in the summer. What this map is showing is summer rainfall projections at the end of century. So if we look at 2080 to 2100, we see drier than normal conditions. That's the brown coloring here. Wetter than normal is the green and the blue. So it's important to think about from an agriculture point of view. We may have a longer growing season across the agricultural zone of Canada, but if we have less rainfall than average, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll have more productive agriculture. So there's a lot of interesting trade-offs in the climate system that we need to think about. Extreme events are really important to a lot of people. My colleague Megan on the line is an expert in this, and she'll help answer any questions about this after the talk. But we're really seeing an increase in extreme weather events that result from a change in the climate system. And we just had, a very extreme rainfall event in Toronto and surrounding area last week. And so we're seeing an increase in extreme heat events. These will become more frequent and more intense in the future. And my next slide will provide a bit more detail on this. So if we're increasing heat events, that means the severity of heat waves and the human health impacts of those will increase. We'll have increased risk from drought events and, of course, from wildfire risk as well, which we're already seeing. From an extreme rainfall point of view, what we're really seeing is a change in the return period for rainfall events. So extreme rainfall events. So what this means is that a very intense rainfall that we would statistically expect to happen once every 20 years, as we move into the future, these will become more and more frequent. And so what we would expect to see once every 20 years, by 2050, we'll see once every 10 years. Or expressed differently, it's a twofold increase in the frequency of these extreme events. And I saw a recent piece that described the last rainfall event in the GTA. It was our third once in 100-year rainfall event in 10 years. So the type of event that we would expect to happen maybe once a century is happening much more frequently. And that's entirely consistent with what we would expect to see. This, of course, when we have these summertime, especially extreme rainfall events, leads to urban flood risks in particular. We have a lot of impervious surfaces in our urban areas, and when rain falls very intensely over a short period, it creates some serious challenges, as we saw in the Don Valley last week. Just to sort of articulate the extreme event impacts in a slightly different way, this is a figure from the IPCC, and what it's showing is heat extremes and how we can expect these to change in the future as our global warming reaches different levels. So right now we're somewhere here where we've had about 1 degree of warming. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but it's the left side plot here. So the type of event we would expect to have once in the historical record, once every 10 years. Now we're seeing it almost three times. In the future, when our global warming level reaches 1.5 degrees, it will happen 4 times a decade. By 2 degrees global warming, it will happen 5 or 6 times. So it's this idea that we now can understand with every increment of warming, as our planet gets warmer, we can quantify exactly what the impacts of that will likely be from an extreme event point of view. So all of these events, heat dome events, high temperatures, extreme rainfall, we can scale the probability and the frequency of these events to the amount of global warming. And so that's a very powerful tool, I think, which helps us with our forward planning and our adaptation to climate change. Just to talk about a different expression of extreme weather, atmospheric rivers, their activity. So I think you've heard about these, particularly in the context of the West Coast, where we get these sustained flow of very moist air from over the Pacific Ocean, rises over the mountains, deposits a lot of rainfall. So this atmospheric river activity, these are sustained over multiple days. It's increased over Canada since about 1950. We have some low confidence in the magnitude of the change and how much of that change is because of climate change, but that's an area of active research that we're trying to understand more. And you can see even for Eastern Canada, I was a bit surprised when I looked at this paper. I always assumed that atmospheric rivers were more of a West Coast influence, but you can see over Eastern Canada as well. So what these two maps are showing is the contribution of atmospheric river events to heavy precipitation. So when we see lots of rain, like what's the mechanism? Why is it happening? And you can see over the Pacific coast, a lot of yellow. That means atmospheric rivers are predominantly responsible for these heavy rainfall events, but you see it over Eastern Canada as well. So these are systems that move off the Atlantic, and you can see it even in southern Ontario in the Great Lakes area. We see some yellow there as well. The bottom plot shows when do we get, if we have heavy rain and high winds at the same time, so that's a compound event. We have 2 risky things happening at the same time. We can see a lot of yellow here. That means atmospheric rivers account for nearly all the heavy rain and concurrent high wind events that we see. So really interesting understanding, trying to understand why atmospheric river events are changing. Again, as I mentioned, it's a key area of research, and we do expect these to continue to increase in their frequency and their intensity in the future, again, because a warmer atmosphere can store more water vapor. This is really one of the simplest plots that we have in our presentation. It just shows the cumulative thickness change of the meters of water. So if you were to melt a glacier and see how much water depth results from it, this is how our glaciers in Western Canada are shrinking. So profound loss of mass, loss of water from these glaciers over the past number of decades. And this is really important because all that water flows east. So while we don't use it in this province, a lot of the prairie provinces derive a lot of their water from the mountains in Western Canada. And we know that between 2050 and 2100, we will lose nearly all of these glaciers. So that source of water supply will be gone and it won't be replaced. So that's something that when we think about adaptation to climate change from a water availability, water supply point of view, the seasonality and where our water comes from will shift profoundly in certain parts of the country. So we have to think about how snow cover and glacier change will affect our water supply. We also know when we have a warmer summer, we lose more surface water through evaporation. So if we think about the Great Lakes and watersheds in surrounding areas, that will have an impact on the water balance of those systems as well. I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to cover these next 2 slides, but I just wanted to, for the sake of completeness, mention that we have assessed climate change impact on oceans So maybe less relevant to us in central Canada, but we have assessed oceans, we have assessed sea level rise. This is an important part of our process as well. I'll send these slides out afterwards, so that content will be there, for the sake of completeness. Just a couple more slides left. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of future changes to the climate system. What do we need to do collectively to mitigate climate change? And you've probably heard a lot about reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions. This is a really important target. It really requires deep reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions. And when we talk about net zero, what that really means is we're always going to be emitting some greenhouse gases. So it actually implies a net negative. So there needs to be some removal of carbon dioxide from the climate system. And now we have CDR technology, carbon dioxide removal. So this is a necessary technology which will help us achieve a net negative CO2 budget in the long term. The challenge with CDR is scaling it up. So right now, existing and proposed facilities extract about 1 million tons of CO2 per year, but our 2022 global emissions were about 40 billion tons. So you can see that there's potential here, but the scaling up of carbon dioxide removal technologies is really necessary to help push us along. So really, I think renewables, our use of fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage, these are really key components that we can combine with CDR to help us mitigate the impacts of climate change. What does Canada look like in the future? Well, it's important to point out that we have different scenarios, different pathways. Our climate future is not yet set. It depends on the policies that the globe basically embarks on. What the map is showing here is two different scenarios into the future. I would say the left one is more of a low carbon economy future, and the right one is a very carbon intensive future. So if we emit a high burden of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we'll get the scenario on the right. The map on the left is more a lower carbon scenario. And what we're seeing, this is increases beyond what we've already seen. So on the left, it's another 1.5 to 2 degrees of warming across Canada by the end of the century. And on the right, it's between 4 and even up to 8 or 9, depending on where you are in the country. So a lot of warming in the north. So clearly, these are very divergent futures. We don't know yet, of course, which pathway we'll be on, but it makes clear the impact of the policy frameworks that we adopt moving forward. So my final take-home points are that the impacts of warming, which are happening now, are evident across the whole country. Responding to climate change requires a full range of actions, from the individual to the collective to internationally coordinated actions. The longer we wait to adapt and mitigate climate change, the more expensive the response will be. We need to do something about carbon dioxide removal, because future energy development that's planned, that is enough to push us to about 2 degrees of warming globally. So we need to think about what we can do to mitigate our carbon budget. And finally, I'll just say that a new version of Canada's Changing Climate Report, as I mentioned, is in development, and it will be available for release next year. So I know I just threw an incredible amount of climate change science and associated impacts at you in a very short period of time. It's a lot to take in. I hope Megan and I can answer some of your questions now. We can steer you to the CCCR website, which is shown on the slide here. The full report is available there for download and for reading. And yeah, hopefully this was insightful to you. I know it's a lot, so I'm also happy to answer follow-up questions by email if I can steer you into more depth in specific areas. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody a little bit better. And thanks a lot for your attention.
Well, thank you, Chris and Megan, for coming today. We have a couple of questions. I'm just going to start off, if you don't mind. You did talk about atmospheric rivers, which I've been talking about for a while. How does the melting of the permafrost and glaciers feed into that process? Or is that something that maybe I can, email you about? Because it sounds like it's not just ocean rise. I'm sure there's just more water in the whole system that is causing these atmospheric rivers. So
Yeah, I think most of the atmospheric river influence actually is happening over the oceans. So we have an increase in sea surface temperature, so the temperature of the water. And so when you combine that with an atmosphere that can store more water, the whole evaporation cycle is kind of sped up and made more strong. I don't know if that's even the right turn of phrase. It's stronger, and so that's why we're seeing these systems coming on shore that contain a lot of moisture. And whether it's atmospheric rivers in the mid latitudes where we live, or it's cyclones in the tropics, these have the potential for much more destruction now because they're stronger, there's more energy, there's more heat, and there's more water available for these systems. So I think that's a major driver behind what we're seeing.
Yeah, the glaciers are melting, so the water has to go somewhere for sure. And locally, we have expansion of methane gas through a company here. Instead of, not doing that, we're expanding, and here we are trying to capture greenhouse gases and whatever. Meanwhile, they're expanding. So question, do you know whether the federal government is going to bring in some sort of policy around expansion of gas?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm probably not quite the right person Megan and I aren't the right people to answer that sort of question exactly. But I mean, I think what's really important is that, the methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. And it is a bit more short-lived in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, which is a good thing. But it's kind of flown a bit under the radar for a lot of people in recent decades, but it's become more central to the focus now. So I would expect regulatory attention, if it hasn't already, to be focused in that area.
Thank you. Kriya?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I'm coming in from Aspen, Colorado right now, and it's a little bit smoky, and everyone's saying, "Oh, that's smoke coming down from Canada." So not a proud thing to wear, but I don't know much about CDR, and I was wondering, could you tell us first of all a little bit about how it works, where we have these CDR systems working, and what the CDR goals are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Megan, you can put your hand up if you want to answer this one, because I'm not a CDR expert. I do know that the technology essentially involves removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it deep underground. And so there is an energy component this is where you take some energy to pull that out of the air, essentially. So you're releasing greenhouse gases to remove them from the atmosphere. So that's where the scaling up of the technology is challenging. My understanding of as far as where they're located is more in Western Canada, but I don't know the details on that exactly. But the IPCC has done a lot of assessment on that, and if I had a bit of time, I can dig into that and send you some of the information on that for sure. Because
did you say
it's really an emerging important area?
IPCC. Yeah, because I mean, I don't even know what these plants look like, and these CDR plants. Like, what do you see?
I don't either.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah.
We're ramping up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Crazy. And our goals, you're saying we have to ramp up. So do you know what our official goals are with CDR?
I don't know officially, but I know that so again, I can steer you to some of the climate mitigation work that's been done that sort of quantifies some of this. And so again, the other, so there's the CDR piece and there's the abatement piece, in the sense of when we're burning greenhouse gases, capturing and storing the greenhouse gas emissions before they go to the atmosphere. So CDR is removing it once it's in the atmosphere, and then carbon capture and storage is capturing it as you emit it when you're producing energy. So both of those technologies together will be a huge help, and or we're counting on them to be a huge help, because again, as we've said, without something to counteract our ongoing emissions of greenhouse gases, reducing emissions is super important, and governments are working towards those targets, but we'll do much better if we can complement that by reducing or by withdrawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere currently.
I mean, it makes really a lot of sense, and yet it's funny. It's something we're so most of us we just don't even know what a CDR plant looks like, right? So I do appreciate anything you can forward, but I'll go and reach it. Yeah, thanks very much for your whole presentation.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Priya.
Hey, Tracy?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to flesh out something. So our CAs in Ontario have developed very fulsome tree planting programs. And tree planting is essential when it comes to those, reductions in those cooling. I'm wondering if you have any information on some of the native trees in different areas are changing because we are adapting, right? There's new trees that provide better cooling in different zones. Speaking of which, when you talk about our wildfires, you've got some trees out there that are not fireproof, but they are less acceptable to be burnt to the ground. I'm just wondering, during this whole climate, crisis and change and talking about the future, if there's a section in there that we're really focusing on, obviously under the 50 billion Act, I get that, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and we need to actually adapt because our trees are adapting. So I was just wondering if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important points you've made. I think there obviously is the emphasis on planting trees for what they do as a natural part of the carbon cycle. They are a huge help, but there's other benefits of that towards how water flows over the landscape, the cooling effects you get, all sorts of different effects. It's rarely a bad thing to plant a tree. That's probably the shortest way to say that. And we're also seeing. So we are seeing changes across the forest zones. We're seeing changes in the tree line. We're seeing changes in shrub growth into the Arctic. That has a major impact. On the fire risk side, maybe I'll pass it over to Megan to see if she has comments. I mean, it's tricky because fire is a natural part of the ecosystem for forests. Some forests need fire to generate themselves again. So I'll let Megan maybe speak a bit more about speciation and fires. So Megan, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. This is edging out of my fire expertise, which comes from the climate side, but it is certainly something that is being considered in the wildfire management community, not just changing species of trees, but also health of the vegetation that's there. For example, with warmer temperatures, we see migration of pests as well. So more infestations of the trees that are there. Dead trees are easier to burn than live and green trees, so that is another factor. And I think, yeah, everything you mentioned about considering trees is true. And I think there's a lot of attention in the impact and adaptation community thinking about how can we use the natural environment to help us with our response to climate change. So sorry, I don't have much more to say than that.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
that's
And
it.
like I said, in these presentations, those are kind of things that, we want to hear those good news stories as well, that we are making changes. And that's just one faucet, so to speak, to examine and lead to something like that in a report. Just my thoughts.
I should emphasize too that we do struggle in the climate science community to emphasize the positive development. There are positive developments. These presentations always are a little daunting because you see all these impacts that they require us to adapt to. There are some good news stories out there, and it's important that we consider those and build on those because, as you've described, these are a big help.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jerry and then Peter?
I don't know if you can answer this question, but what impact is it going to have on our water systems like the Trent Severn Waterway or the Rideau? I know that it's been pretty precarious at the last couple of years because of the lack of snowfall and depending on spring rain to bring the levels of the lakes up to feed the canal.
That's a great question, and that's like a really fundamental sort of question that we need to understand. I think I'm a snow scientist by training, so I think a lot about snow. And what's great about snow is that it stays it should stay on the land surface in our region, for a number of months over the winter, and then it melts in a predictable way. And conservation authorities can plan for that snow melt and manage the water accordingly. Rain is a lot harder to manage, right? Because it's more Rainfall events are more sporadic in nature. The runoff is generated immediately after it rains, unlike snow where it's stored. So as we move away from snow-dominated catchments in southern Ontario, I think it creates a significant challenge from a water resource management point of view. And then when you consider evaporative loss from water bodies is increasing during warmer summers, there's a number of challenges that point towards changes in the water cycle. And so lake levels, it's a hugely important problem. And I think this is where some coordination of what we know from observations and from science with the practitioners on the ground, the conservation authorities on the ground, is really important to make sure the information is flowing in both ways, because we need to know what your limits to adaptation are. So like how much can water levels go down before the waterway isn't sustainable for use in its current form, things like that. So this is a long answer to your question, but it's a lot of the changes projected into the future pose risks to water levels in lakes in our region. And so we have to think really carefully about how we manage water flows.
Right. Okay, Jerry?
Through the chair, I'm really interested in finding out the actual way that you come up with a mean surface temperature for the planet, and how it's averaged month to month, year to year, and where you actually gather those data points to come up with these statistics.
Yeah, so there's every government that contributes these measurements. So basically every country around the planet has a network of sites in their country where they're measuring surface temperature using standardized instruments and standardized methods. They're all fed into a database that's coordinated by various international agencies like the World Meteorological Organization. And there's also ocean-based measurements. We have obviously way fewer measurements over the ocean, but all of these measurements are collated together. And to compute an average over the globe, it's essentially every measurement over the land surface and over the ocean that's made averaged together over an annual cycle. So it's a very crude, I would argue it's quite a crude metric. It doesn't really mean a lot to a lot of people. If you tell them the mean global temperature is X, like I don't really know what that means. But what's important is looking at the long-term change from that. And then I think going into each individual country, looking at our data for Canada, understanding the patterns of change is really important. So all that data is also the documentation of it, the description of it, it's freely available. There is a lot of jargon, technical jargon that some people is a bit of a barrier in some ways to working with the data. But yeah, the science community has really made great strides in being very transparent with how the measurements are made, how the data are organized, how the methodologies are applied to the data. And again, it's a bit tedious, but it's all described in these climate assessment reports like the IPCC produces. So I hope that's not that too specific an answer, but hopefully that gives you a flavor for kind of how this work is done.
Through the chair, on that note, so I'm guessing that over the last 100 years, that dynamics has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
So when we start mapping this out in the past 100 years, like it's crude now, it would have been way more crude before. What I'm really curious of is what is the right temperature for the planet? And how often in the last 1,000 years has it been the right temperature?
Yeah, well, it depends where you are and what you want to be doing, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I guess there's no simple answer to that question, other than I think what's important is that we understand for any location, for any region, how the temperature has evolved over recent decades and how we adapt to the future changes that we'll see.
Great. Well, thank you. And I just have a quick question. What country is Canada or another country heating faster? Are we you said a lot of northern countries, but what country is warming the fastest?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Canada would be near the top of the list, unfortunately, because we are northern country, but in Northern Europe. So any Scandinavian countries are experiencing warming, above the global mean. Certainly parts of northern Russia So basically any northern area. So like Alaska is the part of the state that's warming the fastest in the US is Alaska, because it's the northernmost state. So it's a very, I won't go into I didn't go into the details, but there's a very well understood series of sort of processes that explain why it warms more as you move north. And so we're just consistent with other northern countries.
Well, thank you for your presentation. It was not that hopeful. Sorry, 3% is kind of scary, but thank you for bringing this information to us, and we can all go online and get more information. I certainly will. So thanks
Great,
again.
yeah. You're welcome. I'll send the slides out. I know it's a lot of things to throw at you, so please don't hesitate to reach out to Megan and I if we can provide some more resources and clarify some more questions. So we'll drop off now. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. Okay, can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Jerry, Tracy? All in favor? Carried, great. Okay, and now we're on to 6.2, Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan. Tanya Lang, Water Quality Specialist.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Tanner. Tanner.
Okay, it's working. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Before I start, just want to acknowledge that the work that I'm going to be presenting has been supported greatly by my colleagues as well. So I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Anita and Galen, who supported me on this project. But we are excited to, oops, there we go, wrong button, to present the Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan consultation project. Today's presentation, I'll go over Lake Scugog, the background on the Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan, and to provide some updates on the consultation that we've been doing this year. The geographic area that I'm going to be presenting on is, of course, Lake Scugog, but not only the lake, but we're also talking about the watershed itself. So anything within this kind of highlighted area, all that water will end up in the lake. And to give some kind of characteristics of Lake Scugog, it is the largest lake in our watershed. It is an artificially created lake through the dam in Lindsay. Unique to Lake Scugog, it's actually a headwater lake, so it receives all the water from the surrounding watershed. This year was unique because we didn't have a lot of snowfall, so the water level was lower than normal. It flows from west to east and then south to north. And the folks who live in Port Perry don't get their drinking water from Lake Scugog, although Port Perry is very close to Lake Scugog. But the residents, including myself and Lindsay, do, which is kind of a cool fact. And it stretches from Manila all the way to the north to kind of Shirley Road to the south here. So it's a very large watershed. Just going to give a background on the Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan. The Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources started studying the lake back in the 70s. That was before I was born. But Kawartha wasn't really involved until 2004. That's when we started the Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan. And we studied the lake and its watershed intensively. And we published the report in 2010, which is free online for your download. It's a nice Sunday read. And from 2010 to this year, 2024, we've been implementing kind of the recommendations out of that report. And unique to this year, we're celebrating 20 years of monitoring on Lake Scugog, which is unique across many kind of like scientific groups. There's not really many long-term kind of studies like this. The original Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan, the key objective of that management plan was to ensure long-term sustainability of Lake Scugog, and this was done through identifying sources of nutrients, primarily phosphorus and nitrogen, and to kind of look at the status of Lake Scugog and come up with recommendations as well. We looked at a bunch of watershed characteristics, including the history, land use, soil, water, the things in the water, nutrient levels, the ecology on the landscape, and also some social economic characteristics as well. Once we kind of like looked at the status of them, are they good, fair, poor? We worked with members of the public and key stakeholders to develop recommendations to kind of ensure the long-term sustainability of Lake Scugog. And then from then on, we implemented those recommendations we created projects through the implementation program, and we supported the work of others, and we also tried to collaborate with others just to kind of stretch those dollars. In total, we had 76 recommendations coming out of the LSEMP plan. 24 were completed, 5 were in progress. 58% are completed and ongoing, and 13% are not initiated. Some programs will be finished this year, such as the Durham Investigative Upstream program. But a lot has come out of that plan. We supported landowners through the Scugog Water Fund. We established the Healthy Lake Scugog Steering Committee. We also supported the Scugog Connection Store. And these are all some of the reports that came out of the Durham implementation program. Those kind of reports are free online. And the data generated has actually gone to the province as well to support their broad-scale monitoring program. So our current monitoring design, although we've looked at a bunch of watershed characteristics during the initial LSEMP monitoring, we've kind of scaled it back to just focus on water quality. Currently, we have 6 lake sites. These are the the diamonds in the lake, 8 stream sites across major streams that flow into the lake. We work with the province to monitor 2 provincially water quality monitoring stations at Blackstock and Denonquan, and we have 2 water level sites. What do we do at those sites? We looked at different water quality parameters, such as temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, and we also collect water for chemical analysis of nutrients, salts, so chloride, and suspended solids. We do that in the lake and also across our stream sites. Unique to our stream sites, we have water level loggers. So we looked at the water level at 1-hour intervals. These loggers are amazing. So I don't have to be out there standing every hour and dipping something in the water. So, so I'm gonna present on kind of updates on our consultation work that we've been doing since early April. So we did 3 ways of doing our consultation. First, we had an online presence through our social media. We handed out flyers as well, which had a link to our online survey. We also held a live stream information session on YouTube for the folks that didn't get our flyers or couldn't see us. We also met with key stakeholders that work or live on Lake Scugog. And we attended the Port Perry's Farmers Market, which is amazing, which we directly engaged with the public there. And this is a picture of me at the Port Perry Farmers Market. It was very cool that day. For our stakeholder engagement, we asked them 4 key questions. What do you like or would like to change from our existing monitoring program? What types of questions can we help answer? What would you like Kawartha Conservation to focus on? And how can we collaborate? And what are the resources needed for that collaboration? Here is kind of like the keywords from the comments received from our key stakeholders. A lot of it revolves around kind of monitoring and the different ecological components of Lake Scugog. We held an online survey in which we received over 500 responses, which is really good. Folks that took our survey, they actually lived on Lake Scugog. They live or work within 5 kilometers of Lake Scugog, and they have been in working or living in Lake Scugog for more than 20 years. So this is the beige area right here. So we're really dialing into folks who have been here for a really long time, who have seen changes on the landscape. And this is a pie chart of the age demographic. A lot of folks who took the survey were within the wiser category. I won't use the O word.
We call it young senior.
Young senior. I'll use that next time to label it. We also asked kind of the folks who took our survey, how knowledgeable do you think you feel regarding kind of these categories or kind of concerns of the lake, ranging from lake water quality to wetland removal to invasive species. The results indicate that folks they're also very knowledgeable, but also lacking some knowledge within these topics as well. But we also asked them, how concerned are you about those kind of topics? And across the board, these are kind of the top 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A lot of them are very concerned about these topics here. So they are very engaged. They're very passionate about the lake. They care about the lake. Our social media presence, we held 20 posts for 20 facts of Lake Scugog for 20 years of monitoring on Lake Scugog. We ran 2 Facebook ads to kind of get people to take our survey. And within our survey, these are we held kind of like a kind of a space for them to tell us what has changed from their viewpoint. And you can see that 31% had the keyword weeds in their responses. Our social media and analytics, some stats, we held over 78 social media posts from March to June. We had an average engagement rate of 2.38%, which is higher than kind of most nonprofits. It sits around less than 1%. The post with the highest engagement was actually about the Nonquan River, which is pretty cool. Guess a lot of people care about the Nonquan River, which they should. So what's next? So right now we are still engaging kind of key stakeholders. We're halfway through our engagement phase. We recognize we currently have gaps within our tourism, municipal staff, and economic areas. So we will focus on those kind of engagement areas. And in 2025, next year, we will take everybody's responses, kind of everybody's comments, and look at kind of what are some trends or kind of key patterns that people would like us to kind of look at. And then we will reveal internally if we want to kind of look at if the current design is meeting the needs of the public. And if not, then we will propose something in 2026. And also, I think that's the end of my presentation. But before I end it, I place a sticker and magnet for everybody to take home.
Yeah.
This is for this project. So
Great, thanks, Tanner. So Tracy, you have a question?
I do have a question for you, Chair. Thank you very much. And I was born before the 70s, when I was water ski on Scugog, so there you go. Quick question is, at the end of your presentation, you said, you know, if this isn't working, the current information, that we may shift gears, right, to find those concerns, I guess, from the local residents a little differently. Do you have any idea what that shift would look like, or?
we don't have the answer at the moment because we haven't engaged everybody yet. But we will keep you posted.
That's always a gap that we're trying to figure out. How do you create that engagement? How do you, recognize those concerns and different? Just wondering if your crystal ball is working today. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tanner? Peter?
Yeah, through you, Chair. It's more of a comment. I hear the same concerns on Pigeon Lake, which is very similar because it's a flooded farmer's field. And weed growth and rice and the whole gambit of what you displayed for Scugog.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, through you, Madam Chair, thanks, Tim, for that. You've been monitoring Lake Scugog for 20 years, and monitoring things like the nitrates, phosphorus, and what have the changes been in 20 years? Are we getting any better? Is it just getting worse? What is?
So it's not through this presentation, but I am working with Andrea Kirkworth at Ontario Tech and Tyler from Environment Canada to kind of consolidate kind of the data set. We haven't done all the work yet, but we have looked at kind of some good things is that the Western Basin, so the Port Perry kind of basin, we have 3 sites there. Maybe I'll go, sorry, I just blasted through this. Where's our slide? Right here. Okay, so this basin, we've seen the water clarity has actually increased from over the 20 years. So we can see further into the lake, and that generally means, you know, better water clarity means better water quality. So that's one good news that we've seen.
Any speculation on the reason why?
I'm not too confident in my response in that, so I won't say it.
I probably just been, but yes, and on your word spread there of the concerns about the lakes, the weeds came up the biggest in the middle. I remember in the 1980s in that Western Basin, you couldn't take a boat through there. You could almost walk across the lake. It got so bad there for a while. And it is better there now, but they still are concerned. They still get hung up on the keel of my sailboats, so we want to get rid of them.
Okay, any other questions, Korea? There, no, okay. Can we get a motion to receive Tanner's presentation, please? Eric and Jerry? All in favor? Carried, great.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you
The
do.
stickers on that.
Okay, so we're at 6.2.1, Lake Scugog Environmental Management Plan Implementation and Early Consultation. Nancy asked. And Tanner and,
Yeah, so this is just an accompanying staff report that goes along with Tanner's
Okay.
presentation, so I'll.
Okay.
Time, if you have any questions?
okay. No more questions, but we do need a resolution for this, please. Okay, Jerry, Tracy, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so now we're on to 7.1, permits issued by designated staff, May to June. Matt Maldo, Director, Planning and Development.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. As found on page 21 of the agenda, during the month of May, we issued 32 permits, and all permits met the CALC timelines for review. 88% met CALC timelines for issuance. During the month of June, we reviewed and issued 98% of all permits within the CALC accepted timelines. As for the provincial timeline for both May and June, we completed all reviews and issued permits within the provincial timelines. We are seeking resolution that the section 28 permits issued by staff have been received. Thank you.
Great. Okay, any questions for Matt? Peter?
Yeah, I have one. There was one application on Highway 49. It said the geographic township of Harvey and then the city of Kawartha Lakes. I don't think that's possible.
Thank you. We will take a review of that, make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it could be Trent Lakes.
It meant it's probably Trent Lakes likely.
Yeah,
There's a
Harvey
geographic.
Township was one of the amalgamated.
Can we do a separate resolution for that? Because it doesn't say it.
Yeah.
Doesn't say that, just, oh, okay, so yeah, okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, any other questions? Priya? No, okay. Can I have a motion to receive Matt's presentation? Jerry, how about Kriya? Okay, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, and then we're on to 7.2. And Matt again.
Thank you. And through you again, Madam Chair. As found on page 31 of the board report, an application has been made for a vacant lot of record along the shoreline of Lake Scugog. What is proposed is the construction of a residential dwelling with attached garage, deck, a driveway extension, and septic system. Through the review process, the design of the site plan has undergone several iterations in an attempt to meet the Kawartha Conservation's policies, upon which the proposed development almost meets all criteria with exception of the balanced cut and fill, and this is due to the property's constraints. When the application began, the proposed loss in storage was approximately 90 cubic meters, and throughout the iterations, it was reduced to 44 cubic meters loss of flood storage, which through engineering review has determined that further reductions using engineering flood storage is not feasible. It is the opinion of staff that the natural risk will be minimal for the proposed development and that there is no feasible alternative to further reduce fill placement below the flood elevation. We are seeking resolution that the permit application pursuant to Ontario Regulation 41-24 to allow the construction of a residential dwelling with attached garage, deck, the installation of a new septic system, and driveway be approved and permitted. Thank you.
Great, okay. Any questions of this for Matt? Kriya? Yes, Kriya?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And through you, my question is, so you're saying that because further amelioration isn't possible, that's why you want to recommend giving the permit. So is there ever, I know I'm always one asking for this, but is there a thought that they would have to change their plan again so that we don't have this situation, or that you would deny it? I mean, I guess I'm hearing that because they can't meet certain standards, you're asking for it to be given at this point. So maybe if you could just go into that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So since the site has our policies, okay, I'll start with the policies. Our policies are aimed to allow development as much as possible within reason. Now, this one does not meet that one policy with the flood elevation, and we have it set up to discourage removal of flood storage within the flood areas as much as possible. However, the proposed site is in context with the pre-approved. It is a lot of it's a historic lot of record that is already deemed for construction residential, so it's already appropriate for the type of construction that's being proposed. What we're seeing that they're proposing as well is not unreasonable for what you would want to put on the property. And from the engineering review of a third party also stated that there is no way to feasibly increase or decrease the amount of influence that is going to be within that flood area. So we bring this to the board so that it's because it's not following those policies, so it's up to the board to determine whether or not it is a reasonable request at this point.
Want to speak to this?
Yep, sure. And
Just 1 sec, Kriya. We're just going to let Mark speak to this.
and just further to the overall context is the policies that we're working with are really board derived policies. So the policy document that we have, we worked with our stakeholders in developing them. We did follow provincial guidelines around flood proofing standards, but the policies that we're seeking relief from are essentially board policies.
Okay.
So there are guidance of staff to issue permits or bring them back to the board for relief of those policies.
Right. Okay, Kriya, you have anything?
Yeah, no, yeah, thanks for that. And I hear you that the staff recommendation is to pass it. So I understand what you're saying and where this is coming from. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Okay, so resolve that the permit application submitted pursuant to Ontario Regulation 41/24 prohibited activities, exemptions, and permits to allow the construction of a residential dwelling with attached garage and deck and the installation of a new septic system and driveway extension be approved and permitted. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Jerry, Harold, any other? Okay, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, and we're on to 7.3, and I just have to welcome Mr. Mark Wilson. He is here in the audience. Okay, so Matt, you're on again.
Thank you. Through you again, Madam Chair. This application proposes the construction of 5 residential dwellings on 5 separate and adjacent lots located on Elm Tree Road, approximately 7.5 kilometers southwest of Lindsay. The development of these lots meets the majority of the board approved policies, with exception to meeting the minimum buffer of 30 meters from the wetland boundary. This development proposes 3 culverts over an intermittent water course during the summer months. So it's infrequent flows during the summer. This has been assessed by a flood study and which stated that there's no risk for flooding attributed to fluctuating water levels in relation to the on-site drainage of the water course. Since the site is importing nearly 14,000 cubic meters of fill to the property, we provided a draft of the permit, which you'd see in attachment 1 on page 47 of the board report. This has been presented for the board to review, and also the permit is being requested for a 5-year permit approval. It is of staff opinion that the large-scale fill placement and proposed development will not increase flood or erosion risks and will not cause any adverse hydraulic impacts to the wetland. We are seeking resolution that the 5 subject properties be approved and permitted for a 5-year period pursuant to Ontario Regulation 4.1-24. Thank you.
Okay, Jerry?
Through the chair, that 5-year duration, does that have to be completed in the 5 years? Or a portion of, how's that gonna work?
The intention is for it to be completed within the 5-year. Should there be other events that just prevent or frustrations that prevent construction, we would not be able to extend this permit. We'd have to go through a new permit process. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Okay, I believe it will also go back to the city for like building permit process. So Kawartha Conservation has really put in a lot of safeguards. So do we have a mover? Is there anybody else? Kriya, do you wanna move this? Okay, do we have a seconder? Eric? Okay, so resolved that the permit application submitted pursuant to Ontario Regulation 4124 prohibited activities, exemptions, and permits to allow large-scale placement of fill and the construction of a new residential dwelling, a new detached garage, septic system, and new driveway entrance at each of the 5 lots, with new culverts at lots 1 to 3 along Elm Tree Road, AR 165-100-600-111504, lot 1. And I'll just go lot 2, lot 3, lot 4, lot 5, geographic Township of Ops, City of Kawartha Lakes, be approved and permitted for a period of 5 years. All in favor? Carried. There you go, Mark. Okay. There's a happy man. Okay. So now we're on to 7.4, Durham East Cross Forest property acquisition. Christy, you want to say anything?
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah.
Congratulations.
So we have successfully secured the property that we talked about. Staff have been out to sort of take a preliminary look at it, make sure that everything looks good, which it does. And we will continue to manage it as part of Durham East Cross Forest. It's completely surrounded by property that we own, so it's kind of nice to fill that hole and to create that consistency of management for the property.
Okay, any questions? Okay, can I have a motion to receive Christie's report? Tracy, Jerry, all in favor? Carried, great, that's great news. Good to get good news. Go. Okay, so we're on to 7.5 watershed-based Resource Management Strategy, Nancy Aspen and Brett Draguno.
Okay, so some of you have heard this spiel, but I'm gonna do it again quickly.
Yes.
So I'm here just to provide an update of the watershed based resource strategy that we are required to do under the Ontario Regulation 16.6 on managed programs and services. So the purpose of this strategy is to assist with evolving or enhancing the delivery of Kawartha Conservation support programs and services and to improve efficiencies and effectiveness. The last one we did was in 1982. So currently we have completed defining our guiding principles and objectives, compiled existing studies, conducted both an internal review of programs to identify risks and priority actions. We've also engaged both stakeholders, stakeholders and public through engagement surveys. Through our engagement with stakeholders to gain preliminary understanding of community needs, staff distributed a survey asking 3 questions. What are the group's biggest challenges? What environmental info would they like to see us collect? And what are some of the emerging trends that their group of communities are seeing? We received detailed responses from various departments from the City of Kawartha Lakes in Durham region, academic institutions, advisory committees, Home Builders Association, and Chamber of Commerce. We also asked similar questions to the public, receiving 85 responses. And through those responses, the top challenges included increased development, water quality pressures, climate change, overuse and crowding of shorelines, aquatic plants, and water levels. We've also established a strategic guidance group in this process to assist us with our project review. So over the course of the summer, we will focus on completing the draft strategy to bring back to the board in September to receive approval to move forward with consultation. So this is just to provide you an update of where we're at.
Great. I sent the request to EAB, so they're excited to give you some comments back as well. So,
Thank you.
okay, so can we have a motion to receive this report? Okay, Jerry and Tracy, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, and we're on to 7.6 interim financial statement. And Jonathan.
Yes, through the chair, similar to Nancy, you've
Yeah.
heard this before.
Yeah. Deja vu.
So today I'm pleased to provide the board with an interim financial statement. This is going up to April 30th. So one of the key pieces here, this is our first interim financial statement under the new framework. So it rolled out from after audit to developing our new statements, which there's a lot of behind the scenes work. So we're really happy that now all of our statements and coding are matching our new budget format, which is exciting. And we put a lot of efficiencies throughout the way so we can have better and more timely reporting internally as well, which has been great. So just go through a quick summary overall at the April 30th time of year, everything looks like it's to be trending towards budget. With the new framework, of course, we're going through a lot of learning lessons and things that we can bring into 2025 as well, which and taking note of that as well. So this year with under planning development services, we of course had the new regulations come through for section 28. So there's been some shifts in just labor allocations throughout the year. So primarily resulting in increased labor towards section 28, especially from Nancy's team supporting with the mapping and regulations updates. So there's been a shift from some of the operating programs to support section 28 with overall neutral budget impact. As well, for Clean Water Act, we just want to note that there's amendments coming throughout later this year that will result in some additional time for drinking water source protection and risk management official. April 30th, they are a bit behind on the cumulative budget, but we're anticipating that that'll quickly change as there's a lot of work to come through that. For IWM, everything's tracking towards budget. As mentioned, just with the GIS specialist heavily supporting Matt's department of the new mapping updates. And the watershed resource-based management strategy is continuing throughout progress for the category 1 and 3 portions and the year-end deadline. Through stewardship and conservation lands, it's early in the year, again at this point, but everything seems to be tracking. Now they're into the heavy field season, which is where a lot of equipment procurement of services is happening. And we're keeping a keen eye on a monthly reporting basis with that. As you've seen, you've probably driven down our road a few times throughout the year. Road and parking lot maintenance has seen some pressures on the budget.
Great.
Yeah, but throughout winter season with our snow removal and then obviously the freeze-thaw cycles have resulted in a couple of potholes that have resulted in some additional work throughout the year.
Just one big one.
Yeah, one big one.
There's one big one. And then corporate services, Bank of Canada overnight rates have been staying elevated. We did see a 25 basis point cut yesterday, and they're predicting a few more throughout the year. But as it's been higher than anticipated, it's a good thing for us as with we don't carry any debt. So it has been increasing our interest revenue. So we're expecting to be ahead on budget for that, which will help support some of our other pressures this year. And then on the vehicle and equipment pool, just on the current statement, it represents a net expense, but we're getting into field season, and we use internal charge outs which help recover like the repairs, maintenance, insurance costs that are noted there. So that's for our general operating. And then category 2 services, I'll just note Trent Lakes, the floodplain mapping project's all wrapped up. And we're just currently going to be working with Trent Lakes just to give them the final breakdown and close out the project for them, their end as well. It was a 15-month project, so in the current statement, it looks like it's over budget, but it was just really a transfer of work from last year to this year, because it's like a 15-month project from, I think it was Jan 1 last year to March 31st this year. One last one I'll just touch on the joint project for forestry and tree planting. We were able to seek additional funding for tree planting initiatives this year, which was a huge benefit. And we're able to come out cost neutral with this. So there's additional cost to do the extra tree planting, but supported through Conservation Ontario and Trees Canada had a national greening program. So it enables us to meet and continually achieve or exceed those targets for tree planting on an annual basis. And with that, I'll just leave it if there's any questions specific to anything in the statements.
Any questions of Jonathan? No, I just wanted to say from Conservation Ontario that we should have an initiative ready to go, because there may be some more funding. So just a heads up. Okay, can we have a motion to receive Jonathan's report? Eric and Peter, all in favor? Carried. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we're on to 7.7. Mark Bukowski, Leadership Team Strategic Actions Update.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have for you the second quarter updates, which are tied to our strategic plan, and that ties in with all the different activities that we're doing on a project and program basis across all of the departments. So there's a lot of detail there that are kind of touched upon in some of the CAO updates or some of the other updates that you see in some of the more focused board items. But this gives you a little bit of an idea of what's been going on in the background on all of them. And certainly myself and the directors are available for any questions. I'll highlight maybe a couple of different points in here, maybe 4 or 5. One is it's pretty evident we're in field season. So that's something you see in the updates. And I'll highlight a couple of other pieces, which are the water fund. For instance, we're tying up some of the allotments from last year currently. So when someone completes the work, we're able to provide them with that funding, and it's dependent on a site review, make sure the work's been done. But this year we've also got that underway, and so there will be a fall intake of programs. But to date, between the 2 programs between Durham and the city, 61,800 has been slotted for different landlords, different projects in the watershed, and we look forward to allowing the full amount, which is never undersubscribed, it seems. So it's great. We usually see some tremendous returns as well from people wanting to invest in their properties and do some good things that really influence overall watershed health and water quality.
Great.
In terms of flood forecasting abilities, we've been busy on that front, as tied with our integrated watershed management strategy and some of our programs that we're doing to try and get a handle, as you saw with the climate change, more intense storms, less snow. So that means a lot more variability in our watershed, which we're trying to get a handle on and reduce some of the effort that we have to try and get a handle on that information and have it accessible to us when something does occur. So we've been upgrading a couple of our rain gauges, adding one to a groundwater well. And we've, if you noticed on the drive in at the very top of the hill, on the left-hand side as you're driving in, there's a there's a structure there now, that's a brand new rain gauge. So it's functional, it's actually tied in with the province. Their surface water monitoring center. So it's all been collected now, it's available for that. They also supported that going in. The other thing that we're doing on that front is we have our climate change group that are busy collecting water samples, and the intent of that is to try and augment our information. And there's a couple of graphs in the CIO report which shows a little bit more of a focus on some of those changes, but we're just through that network, we're able to get a better sense of the rainfall events and really just how sporadic they really are. So it's quite interesting and quite useful, I think, as we go forward. Once we have more information, we'll probably do a little bit of a highlight on that for everyone. We have a couple of programs that wrapped up floodplain and spring tree planting, which you'll have seen in there with some great numbers from a tree planting perspective, which is quite encouraging. And the last one I'll mention, which is more of an opportunity that's developing, which you'll see in the updates, is we're part of a collaborative with the Greater Golden Horseshoe Conservation Authorities. And there is the STEP program, which is working around sustainable technologies. And so there is a desire amongst all the CAs to provide coordinated services to municipalities on the asset and consolidated linear infrastructure requirements in the various regulations. So we are looking at trying to provide something that's consistent amongst all of the municipalities and CAs across Southern Ontario. So pretty exciting, I think. And we're hoping that municipalities will be interested in that program and take part in it. So
Great.
So that is a brand new program, and that's I think the highlights I'll provide.
Okay, any questions of Mark on this? Okay, I was just wondering, from the climate change presentation and these freak storms through some sort of website, do you get any idea how intense some of these storms are going to be and where they're going to sit? Because he did say, we do get atmospheric rivers.
Yep.
So in Southern Ontario. So I'm just wondering, in preparation, do we get any heads up?
We do get a heads up. So we use about 3 different weather informations that come into us that are predictive based in order to get a sense of how big a storm is going to be, and they vary.
Yeah.
Some will show some are more conservative models, I'll call it. Some more realistic, and so there's a pretty big range, but you don't know until it actually falls.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get a better handle on that. And
Nancy?
I was just gonna say that we're actually struggling a little bit with that because we get all of these weather warnings. And to say we're gonna get up to so much rain, well, across our watershed, we're seeing huge variation of how much rain is coming. Just for example, last night, Lindsay, where I live in Lindsay, we got 23.8 millimeters of rain. And here at Kenreen only got 8 millimeters. So there's such a difference amongst the south of our watershed to the north. And so that's where it's hard. It is hard, but we do our best.
Yeah. Tracy?
Oh, no, and based on that, you have sensors out there, right? And collectively you can get that data. So, I know from a business perspective on our end, we have weather stations now attached to our greenhouses. So, because they're automated, when the wind kicks up, the lids have to come down, when the rain gauges, everything's automated because we were struggling with damage and not reacting fast enough because of these storms, right? So I mean, I can see how far the system's come just in the last 2 years. I imagine for the conservations as well, they're going to be able to tap into some of these, things so we can react quickly, so to speak, but it costs money, right?
Yeah.
I just noticed that, we get a big rain event and then the winds pick up afterwards. I just found that really interesting, that then it dries it all up and So my garden's going, no, that was great, but now it's all dry. So anyway.
I think in the mix of it, like we've had some discussions internally around how do we adapt to all this, and I think the great thing is that even though we've been in the business for a relatively long time, I think there's lots of growth still to be recognized, and so part of that involves like our volunteer monitoring program, which really helps us figure out.
What's going on.
You saw some of the maps in the CAO report. We're just trying to tease out that a little more, but there's lots of greater opportunity there, and even within that program, there's opportunity to get the information quicker, more consolidated. And there's just like Tracy was mentioning, you have a weather station on, for your business. We've talked about the need to engage business owners that probably have rain gauges already, and have that
Feed that, yeah. That's great.
I think there's agriculture, I know there's some metric stations there, road networks, is another one, and just all that.
That's how you adapt, Okay, great, thank you. Can we have a motion to receive Mark's report, please? Peter, Kriya, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, and now we're on to 7.8, CAO report. Mark again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll do a quick synopsis of some of the items in my report. One of them that I'll mention is a regional climate change and conservation partnership. So it's a developing initiative that I think is pretty exciting, and the Kawartha Land Trust is the one that has got some funding for that. They've hired a coordinator, and the intent is to really bring together a bunch of organizations and try and make a dent in climate change locally as a regional collaborative. So it's built on a model that's been working in the United States, and so looking at bringing it forward to here and seeing if there's some strategic alignment that we can achieve between organizations. So that's about as far as it is at this point in time, but we look forward to some additional conversations and trying to get some cohesion, I guess you can say, amongst a bunch of different agencies.
And I was lucky enough to go to the announcement last week, so that was interesting for sure. Okay.
If you want, I can highlight
Keep going.
Other things, but I know there's some questions too.
Yeah.
The other one I'll mention is communications. I think we've seen some reductions in funding for a number of local reporting groups over time, as well as recently, which is affecting the radio, print, and also television. So just highlights that the need to generate our own content and still reach out to everyone is tremendously important. So I think we're doing a great job of creating that, and a lot of that's through John's work, and then going in, it's really a lot of everyone I think is on board internally on that. So I think it's great. I know Brett's sitting there too. He's pretty quiet right now, but he's been a great supporter, and so got lots of great information that we can share with our people, and it's something that everyone's excited about, I think. So the other thing I'll identify is we've done a lot of work on our IT infrastructure, and that's a lot of Warren's work. So we've reduced, as you probably noticed, all of our most critical, sensitive gaps at this point in time. So that means that any security risks that we had potentially through various improvements, we've been able to address those, and so that means that we're in a pretty good spot from that perspective. The only other one I think I'll mention is the hydro corridor. So East Cross Forest, we have a lot of funding to build a tall grass prairie and wetlands features in that area where we end up with a lot of vehicles traveling through, but also the hydro operations end up causing some damage through there. And I think this is an item that Director Richardson had to go to a meeting to as well. So that same line that goes through Kawartha and Durham goes right through East Cross Forest. And if we do all the work now, it would actually end up getting destroyed because of the line that and the timing of the works that they have. So we're just trying to work through that right now. And that means negotiating with the funding agency and see if they're willing to make sure that the work's put in is not gonna, we
Yeah,
can shift it and not
Makes
have it
sense.
ripped up.
Yeah.
And, yeah, then have to do it again, so.
just we, at, our council on Tuesday, our tall grass bylaw went through. So that's gonna be interesting, how that all evolves. So any other questions, Eric?
Just a quick one, opportunity, Deputy Mayor, McDonald is working hard at the plowing match and it was in there. So another chance to announce to the public October. Yeah, on his behalf, but in it mentioned you have a partnership with Ducks Unlimited, and I just wasn't sure, were you referring to that separate, or was the Ducks Unlimited piece that they're also doing something at the plowing match?
There's a bunch of them.
Yes, and Christy could probably talk a little bit about it, but we do have an agreement with Ducks Unlimited
Big
to
table.
have a feature that is part of the international.
Well, that's great, okay.
And Conservation Ontario.
Oh, good.
So I'll be there for Conservation Ontario.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Peter, Jerry?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Just with that climate change meeting that you were talking about, or collaboration with the Kawartha Lakes Steward or
Land
Trust. I was just wondering if Kawartha Lake Stewards would put some input in that.
Yeah, so right now, like I say, Kawartha Land Trust is one that's coordinating it, and so we've been working with them. We identified a number of key agencies, and lake stewards were identified as part of that. So and they knew that they existed too. So it's it's really just trying to pull together a lot of different, primarily environmental, but we did give some suggestions to maybe broadening out from environmental, maybe a couple other agencies that would be beneficial to include. So yes,
that's great.
Right there.
Kriya?
Yes, thank you, and through you, with regards to the climate change group that I think you're saying is being formed, in the midst of being formed. Is there a role for municipal representation on that?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. That was actually one of our suggestions, was that municipalities would probably have a pretty key role to play in that collaborative. So we did identify that as one of the agencies that were a group of organizations that should be included in that collaborative. So
that's great. Thank you.
Jerry, did you have a question? No, okay. All right, anything else? No, okay. Can we have a motion to receive the report, the CAO's report? Jerry, Harold?
Sure.
All in favor? Okay. So we're on to 7.9, correspondence. So, okay. Do you have any questions on the correspondence? So we need a motion on that too, please. Eric and Tracy, all in favor, carried, good. And so we're on to 8.1, Alice. So it was a very interesting presentation last month, but it was very good. Yeah. So I'm quite excited about this, us taking that on. I think it's great. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions? Okay. All right. Whereas the Alternative Land Use Services ALICE program is seen as a beneficial program within the watershed, and whereas the current legal entity for the regional program will be stepping away from the program coordination role. Resolve that staff be directed to continue discussions with ALICE National and the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters regarding the opportunity for Kawartha Conservation to become the new legal entity for regional ALICE program, and that a cost-benefit analysis be prepared and brought forward to the board of directors to inform a possible commitment as the new legal entity for the ALICE program. So did I get a mover and seconder on that? No. Did I? Can't remember. Okay, can I have a mover and seconder? Okay, Jerry, Eric, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, And we're on to 8.2, Conservation Authorities Act and regulatory changes, regulated area mapping, update map mental.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This report can be found on page 198 of the board agenda. As outlined in the board agenda, for the May, let me start again, apologies. As outlined in the board agenda for May 23rd, the regulation mapping has been updated to reflect Regulation and Conservation Act changes and incorporated updated technical data. Since the changes are significant in nature, we were required to notify stakeholders, municipalities, and public of the proposed changes in any manner the authority considers advisable. Regarding the notice, we circulated letters to the municipalities, the stakeholders, and for public notification, we posted social media, performed a media release, and held a public open house on June 12th, which had approximately 30 visitors that attended. We are seeking resolution that the updated regulation mapping that has been updated currently and is live, that is also meeting the legislative and guidelines and incorporating the technical updated data, be adopted and adopted for immediate use.
Okay. Any questions about the mapping? Nope. Okay. Oh, Kriya, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say I really noticed what you guys did, and I think you did a great job. Thank you very much for doing that. And I'm just curious. I couldn't make the open house, but you say I think about 30 members. What was sort of like the average reason for interest from the public that you saw represented there?
They were mostly curious about what's going on for their property, why, and they're just overall like, how does it affect them mostly?
Were they interested in development, or were they more interested in conservation?
Just they were curious about their own properties mostly. They were focused on how does it affect them, and there was some individuals that came in that were highly focused on how it would affect development. There were a few, but there were a couple of them that were seeing how this would help protect the environment in different faceted ways.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for doing such a great job on that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, can we have a motion to receive the report, please? Jerry, Tracy, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, so we're on to 8.3, hearing guidelines update, a little light reading. Mark.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. The hearing guidelines, they provide a context for which an application is reviewed by the board, where we think it's going to be contentious, or where we really believe the provincial guidelines don't meet the intent of the development, and the developer is wanting the board to review that. So in other words, they don't want to change their development to really try and get as close as possible to that. So an example would be if someone wants to build a floodplain and really is going to create something that either impedes flow or has too much of an influence on the flood storage capacity. So that would be one example. So the hearing guidelines, they're really geared towards addressing the legislation that's identified in the Conservation Authorities Act and the regulation. So the province actually, it's in two different pieces now, where before it's contained within the Conservation Authorities Act. So what we've done is, due to the new regulation, Conservation Authorities Act, it did change the tests of the regulation. It changed all the legislative references, and it changed the context. There are two additional ways in which a hearing can be held. So the bylaw has been updated to reflect those changes. A little bit of detail behind it is the existing document. What it did was allowed for approval of a permit where contentious conditions are usually at play. If a application would be refused, a permit would be refused if it was canceled. And special provisions around ministry zoning approvals, the MZOs. So in those cases, there has to be a rendering of a positive decision for the developer. The conditions are the question in those. What's new is the new legislative clauses allowed for a refusal to extend a permit as an element that can be heard by the board, and a review of stop work orders as another option. So in terms of the tests of the regulation, they did remove pollution and conservation of land as defined terms, which means it's no longer part of the regulation. But they did add very specifically unstable soil or bedrock, which typically was captured within hazard lands, but now they're just a little more explicit, I guess you could say. And the other aspect is they changed around having pollution. What they did was they put in a new condition or circumstance, and that was one that the development might jeopardize the health and safety or create the conditions or circumstances that would affect a person or affect erosion, dynamic beaches, or those sorts of things. So there's really erosion, dynamic beaches. So those were the really big changes. There is a marked up version that has the red text in there in case you want to see some of the cranial gymnastics.
Yes, we got into the cranial gymnastics for sure.
And the first one was just a clean copy. So because we found that the edits were just a little bit confusing to kind of work out. So clean copy just for clarity.
Good. I'll put that away somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Kriya, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. I got something. Okay. So resolve that the amendments to bylaw number 2 hearing guidelines to meet the amended legislation changes be approved and adopted for use effective immediately. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Harold and Peter, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay. Rock and rolling. Okay, 8.4 corporate website update. Jonathan.
Yes, through the chair, today I'll just be providing a quick update on the corporate website. So just for some background, our new website launched in April of 2020, coincidentally, right when the pandemic hit. And it was a capital cost of approximately $52,000 for the implementation, design, launch, and services of the website. In early 2024, so this year, GHD informed us that all existing clients will be getting phased out on iCreate, which is our back-end content management system for the website, and be moving over to GovStack. So with this, iCreate still being supported, but it's coming towards a decommissioning date in the near future. So we just want to get ahead of this with our resourcing and be able to transition to the new system, which also does offer some new abilities and efficiencies for the website, such as more flexibility for us to manage and adapt pages versus having to have back-end developers make adjustments, photo resizing, permission improvements, etc. So we've been talking to GHD and we've held 2 meetings just to get a better understanding of this throughout the year. Just to kind of interesting facts was we have 100,000 website visitors annually. And since we launched in 2020, we've had processed over $816,000 of primarily permits and different fees. So it's just tremendously helped with customer service and people not having to come to the building during office hours, and they can, submit a permit online, for example. So right now we are faced with 2 options though. One is we migrate to the GovStack process. So through our discussions, it's approximately a $20,000 migration cost. And I will say that every municipality in essentially Ontario and most organizations are in the same boat unless they got onto the site a bit later with the new GovStack platform that exists. And there's annual hosting fees and licensing that was $8,800. Since some time passed since I've been further chatting, we've been able to flatline those costs actually and correspond with our current costs, which is great. Just in discussion. It's the second option is we can go to an RFP based on our previous capital cost to develop the website. We're looking at probably $50,000 to $70,000. And there aren't a ton of players in this atmosphere either that kind of meet all of our needs and services. And bringing back our, we have some custom development too that integrates there for the planning systems and permitting. So those are kind of two options. On our financial implications, we do have funds, deferred revenues for the website that we have when we originally did the project. We had then obtained some grant funds that were able to reduce some of the costs, resulting in deferrals. As well, we recently developed the API between the site and the IMS system that we use internally. And we're able to basically work with CLOCA, another conservation authority, and split those costs up because it would benefit some other CAs, which was good. So bringing this forward just for a policy perspective, so our purchasing policy doesn't exactly identify any waivers for purchasing initiatives, which GHD is under the vendor of record for under the province, and we're part of that group purchasing initiative. But we do have a single source ability. So today we're just looking. We believe there's good evidence that extension or reinstatement of the existing contract with GHD would be most beneficial, and just permission to use the upset limit of $20,000 to migrate with GHD.
Great, thanks a lot. Makes sense. Tracy?
I was just gonna say,
You move
the
it?
recommendation, it just makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Do we have a seconder? Harold? Okay, I'll just read it. That deferred general benefiting funds be approved for the purpose of one-time migration costs with an upset limit of 20,000 plus applicable taxes. All in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, so we're back now to 8.5. Jonathan again.
Perfect.
Corporate, sorry, yeah, so budget guidelines.
Budget guidelines. Through the chair, today we'd just like to provide budget overview and identify some direction for the 2025 budget process and apportionment. So today I'll just be going through our recommended resolutions, our current status, and then timetables into the future for this year. So there's a few resolutions there. I'll just go through my report, but essentially 2024, as I was mentioning, is our first year in the new framework, and we've been going through the new framework, applying some insights, and we'll be able to apply those into the 2025 budget process. I know, thankfully everyone's been taking notes, figuring out what we can fine tune for the upcoming budget. So with this, in the report, I re-identified the 4 distinct phases that are in the Conservation Authority Act that we must accomplish either consecutively or concurrently. I won't go through it in great detail. It's within the report, but I'll just touch on the budget timetable there and where we're going to see those kind of 4 phases. So today we're just looking for the general direction from the board on the 2025 guidelines and timelines, which isn't necessarily a specific phase in the regulations, but something we do like to go through. And then in October, we're looking at phase 1 we'd be achieving, which would be bringing a draft budget to the board of directors that identifies all of our revenues and expenditures, and essentially the net cost, which are the apportionment expense for municipalities. After we do a first review of the budget, we'll bring it back at the November board meeting, provide an opportunity for a second review for the board to review. If there's any adjustments and tuning, we'll take it back then. And if we can seek board approval for consultation, so we have a 30-day minimum notice period for our consultation, which we won't quite hit for December. So right now that'll bring us into the January AGM meeting to allow for public consultation, also to circulate a draft budget to all of our municipalities. And then the January would be our final weighted vote in accordance with the apportionments, and the final separate vote that's required under the new regulations for the budget approval. We'd also tie in phase 4 concurrently into that meeting, where we can subsequently then circulate a copy to the minister, all the CAs, and then update our agreements. So to date, we've only received City of Kawartha Lakes guidelines as of July 18th, or as of today, actually. That's the only guidelines received, and we anticipate the region's guidelines will be similar to 2024, which is 2.5% for operating programs and 1.5% for our special capital one-time funding. Trent Lakes and Cavan, we historically just liaison with their treasurer throughout the process. They don't necessarily give us formal targets, but we'll just kind of keep in discussions with them with where our budgets are going. So the city provided a 3% maximum target from the previous year. And they're requesting budget targets by August 23rd. So today's meeting is important just to get board direction so that we can subsequently follow up with the city and and go through their new process. There's a couple of different steps and information they're looking to acquire as well with their new budget committee. So based on these guidelines and the inkling of the region's guidelines as well, we're suggesting a 2.5% operating levy increase. Additionally, we, through the capital asset management plan that we introduced last year that was endorsed by the board, we're also looking to introduce year 1 of 10 phasing in that capital levy as well. And that'll be subject to board approval and discretion of the municipal partners as well. As far as apportionment percentages, generally at this time of year, we can provide apportionment percentages, which is just basically the modified current value assessments, how those shift between the different municipalities. We haven't received those from the minister yet. I think they had contacted them. They're waiting for some impact data, but we will definitely forward those as either correspondence or new budget updates in October when we have them. And it'll just impact how the shift of some funds or some municipalities might grow population larger year to year, or CVA assessments shift. And another thing I just want to touch on is the Clean Water Act. So currently, we still anticipate that all of our duties under the Clean Water Act will be funded by the province. Right now, we're in the process of a 3-year agreement for drinking water source protection. However, if this ever changes in the future, the ministry has shared we have applicable apportionments that would have to involve possibly participating in specified municipality. But as of right now, we're looking to strike that 3-year agreement, which is great news. Just some of the key things we're looking to bring into this budget. As I mentioned, we have looking at a 2.5% operating increase, which encapsulates those category 1s and 3s in the new framework, plus or minus any adjustments for CVA. Category 2 municipal programs and services will be funded by the benefiting municipalities, and we work through their council as well on those pieces. And recently we had the pay equity and compensation review through 2 months ago now. So just carrying out the implementation of that into 2025, we discussed. Our asset management plan is another key element. Looking through here. And general benefiting projects, we're looking to remain flat as well. And some other things we're looking to evaluate. So above the pay equity, we're recommending cost of livings at 2% in that forecasting model to integrate. And if there is any possibility for merit increases, we can fit into the budget. That would be something we're looking at. Full-time equivalent staff is looking to remain consistent. And then traditional inflation increases for any goods and services that we're seeing come across the board, and implementation of the climate change strategy, which just wrapped up earlier this year. So I know that's quite a bit of information, but we'll come through with a more fulsome, full budget report in October. But I'm just happy to take any comments or anything the board would like to input for the budget process.
Well, it's a good starting point for sure. Any questions of Jonathan? No. Okay, can I have a motion to receive his report? Eric and Jerry, and I'll just resolve that staff bring forward a draft operating category 1 and 3 budget considering a 2.5% municipal apportionment increase based on the current operating levels, economic climate, and municipal guidelines, and that the capital apportionment is phased in accordance with asset management plan, and that staff align the budget process with the actions and timetable presented. All in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, so we're on to 8.6, Lake Dalrymple Management Plan. Nancy and Brett.
Okay, so in May, we came to you and gave you a brief update of Lake Dalrymple Management Plan, and we let you know that the watershed characterization report was drafted. Since then, we have met with our working group again, and we've established several lake management. We understand now there's several lake management challenges evident throughout this process. Some of them include intensification of shoreline development, agricultural runoff, invasive species, climate change, overuse, and quarry operations. And if these challenges are not adequately managed, it could jeopardize the health of Lake Dalrymple. So to address these challenges, we've come up with the Lake Dalrymple Management Plan, and it has been drafted, containing 41 practical actions grouped with 8 recommendations. To obtain feedback on the draft plan, we're asking for board endorsement to move forward with community consultation, which will include hosting 2 open houses in August, as well as posting the plan to our website for a 30-day consultation period. Following our summer engagement, if you endorse that, we will be integrating the comments received into the draft Lake Dalrymple plan and presenting it to the working group for a final review. In late fall, we will come back to you asking for the approval and endorsement of both the characterization report and the management.
Great. Any questions? Yeah, no, okay. So resolve that the update of the Lake Dalrymple Management Plan be received and that the draft Lake Dalrymple Management Plan be endorsed for community engagement. Can I have a mover? Tracy, seconder, Kriya, all in favor? Carried. Great, thank you. Okay. So we're on to 9. Boy, we're go. So a new business, no new business, reports and updates from board members. Well, I'll just start off that we had some good news this week. We've got composting in the urban areas passed, which has been working on that for 20 years. So it's going to be a stepping stone. I think I'd like to see it everywhere, but we're going to start with the urban areas. And as I said previously, our tall grass bylaw passed. So those are 2 big things this week. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Anybody else? Harold?
I don't think I have major announcements.
Anybody else?
No, Pat, you covered us.
Okay. Yeah, Kriya, anything? Yep, Kriya's hands up.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question for you, Pat. Could you tell us about your tall grass bylaw, what it says?
Oh, boy, it's really,
Just a bit.
just,
Send it to her.
yeah, we'll just say it's, yeah, not a bit. Yeah.
So hang on. So you're becoming more permissive, is what I'm understanding.
Yes. So
Yeah.
right now it's only 8 inches.
Yeah.
And we're allowing it to go, I don't even know, as tall as it can go, but it's really to benefit pollinator plants. And you know, I think eventually it needs to be tweaked a little bit. It's not, I think people's concerns is it's going to look messy, but I think pollinator gardens can look really aesthetically pleasing. So it's just, I think there's got to be a lot of education too. Noxious weeds aren't allowed. So, and you're always, not necessarily always, but you do have some people that do let their properties go and you know, you always have those people. So I don't think this is going to be a problem, but it's a big step. We have to protect our pollinators.
We just passed a boulevard gardening bylaw.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
in the same vein, absolutely. And we it comes with a huge public education piece, which we have mostly lifted from the City of Guelph.
Yeah.
And it talks about what to plant in various areas and what not to. And it's our boulevard garden policy, but the idea is that it covers personal lawns as well. So it was really fun to do. And our bylaw officers did a really great job in researching it and creating a really nice new bylaw.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so we're going to make a motion to go into close, please. Tracy?
Yep.
Do I have a seconder?
There.
Harold? All in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, thank you.
And did you want to do the first item? That's something that was